Hey friends, it's Just the Gems, and I'm a PC gamer. That's right, I was once the guy who turned my nose up at everything PC related, but now I've joined the PC Master Race. Master Race here denotes the belief in the 90s and 2000s that people who played games on PCs were inherently better than console gamers. And while the term Master Race has other connotations in the modern era, we will be using it as the good Lord intended, to talk about the ways in which we play video games. Okay, really, I still love my consoles, but if you're a console JRPG player who's interested in crossing the Great Divide and joining the PC revolution, you have more options today than ever before. And one of the best is the Steam Deck. It's got the portability of the Switch with a library of games that is frankly overwhelming. That's why I wanted to bring you 30-ish of the best JRPGs out there that are certified to run on the Steam Deck. All of these, I can either vouch for them myself as being great games regardless of console, or in a few cases for games that I haven't gotten to yet, I have the trusted word of people whose taste I share. Quick background before we hit the list. Steam games can be rated in different ways as far as their compatibility with the Steam Deck. There are games that are straight up unsupported, which means you most likely won't be playing them on Steam Deck without a bunch of tinkering. And I hate tinkering. Then there's games that are playable, but not optimized for Steam Deck. You should be able to enjoy these just fine for the most part, but there could be some oddities here or there that might dampen the experience. And then there are Steam Deck verified games. These have been put through their paces and are confirmed to run on the Steam Deck, so you can feel comfortable plopping down your money. This list is going to cover Steam Deck verified games almost exclusively. I say almost because there are a couple I want to mention that aren't, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. All right, on with the list. First up, we have 4 games that feel tailor-made for a portable console, and only one of them has the word portable in the title. The 3 most recent mainline Persona games are all here, all deck verified, and they're all absolutely fantastic. If you haven't played Persona, the gist of them is that you're a high schooler in modern-day Japan, and you get swept up into some crazy goings-on with your friends that involve you summoning personas, which are basically these big monster things based on all the characters' psyches. For the mainline Persona series, on Steam Deck you have Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 5 Royal, any of which would be a great first entry if you're just starting out. However, you also have Persona 3 Reload, which is the recent remake of Persona 3 that puts it more in line graphically with Persona 5 Royal. If you don't mind not getting to choose the gender of your protagonist like you can in Persona 3 Portable, then Reload is probably the way to go. But hey, nobody says you can't play both. Next, let's talk about the Tales of games. Not the Tales of games, like I don't mean the stories of just games in general. Sorry, that's confusing. I mean the games that are part of the Tales of series. There are more on Steam than what I'm on the list here, but these 3 are ones that I particularly recommend in general. First, Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition. This, in many ways, feels like the grand re-entry of Tales of into the mainstream JRPG conversation. It also started the avalanche of Tales of remasters we've been getting, so it deserves a lot of praise for that. That and for Yuri, who is one of the best Tales of main characters we've ever gotten. Next up is the most recent game in the series, Tales of Arise. Somehow it has the most nonsensical title despite every other game just using made-up words. But it's got a really great story and characters and combat, so it makes the list. And I'm saving my favorite for last, the recently released Tales of Graces F Remastered. This one's a challenge, but it's beautiful and has a lot of heart. The nice thing about the Tales of games is that with only a few exceptions, you can jump in and play them in any order. They're not connected to each other at all. So pick the one that looks the most interesting to you and go for it. If you crave that comfy, cozy, old school aesthetic, but you want graphics that lean more towards the modern, then you've got at least a couple of great options. There's Dragon Quest XI, of course, which is my favorite Dragon Quest, and a great game to start with if you've never considered getting into the series before. It holds on to a lot of the traditional Dragon Quest iconography and music and charm, but it's obviously presented as like a full-scale modern JRPG. But if you're not averse to an even more hardcore old-school game, then Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake is also available. This game is done up in that gorgeous HD 2D style that the awkward title would suggest it uses, and aesthetically, it is just astounding. It's light on the story front, but like I said, for an old school fix, you might not particularly need like a War and Peace type narrative. Good heroes fight bad villains, you got it. It's a lot of fun, and it's especially cozy playing handheld. There have been few games whose stories have moved me quite like Final Fantasy VII. Whether it's your favorite or not, it's hard to argue that it's not had a tremendously large impact on the genre, especially in the West. It basically broke the dam and sent a flood of JRPGs our way. The Final Fantasy VII Remake project is the original team's reimagining of that story told over 3 games, and at this point, 2/3 of the way through, it's just one of the best video game experiences I've ever had, period. And the crazy thing about it is you can play these on the toilet. Just, like, wash your hands. Now, to be fair, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in particular doesn't look the best on the Steam Deck. It's pretty blurry, but I mean, keep in mind, this thing was a PlayStation 5 exclusive for a while. It was developed to push hardware pretty hard. But if blurry doesn't make you worry, then enjoying these games to the fullest on the Steam Deck is more than possible. How do you explain the Kingdom Hearts series to the uninitiated? I mean, I feel like there's a good chance that the vast majority of people watching this video are at least initiated when it comes to Kingdom Hearts, but I don't want to leave anyone out in the cold. Kingdom Hearts is a mashup of Disney characters and Square Enix properties. That sounds super cold and corporate, but as a baseline, it's accurate. When you dive into the games, however, you end up with moving stories and fun characters and more cameos than the SNL 50th anniversary. It's also one of the most convoluted stories in gaming. Yes, I'm sorry Kingdom Hearts stands, but it's true. It's super complicated, and it didn't need to be that way. To be fair though, I kinda love how complicated it is. Like, it's an extra layer of fun on top of the already fun gameplay and characters. But yes, this collection of games and non-interactive videos should catch you up on all the story leading up to Kingdom Hearts 3, which I'm not including not because it isn't Steam Deck verified, but because I haven't played it, nor has anyone I've talked to. So if you want to immerse yourself in this universe of games, the Steam Deck is a fantastic way to do that. Two of the very best Ys games are readily available to put onto your Steam Deck, and frankly, the ease with which you can do that is just extraordinary. Ease. The Ys games are about Adol Kristen, who's an adventurer that never fails to land himself in a bunch of trouble wherever he goes. Usually that trouble involves a shipwreck. In Ys 8, one of Adol's disastrous ship voyages finds him and a bunch of castaways stranded on a mysterious island. And not only do they have to find a way to get home safely, but they also have to avert a tragedy the likes of which the world has never seen. And that's like a pretty typical event in Adol's life, to be honest. Ys 9 has a very different tone and setting, taking place almost entirely within the walled city of Balduc and turning Adol and his friends into superheroes, basically, which lets them zip around the city and take out enemies with way more style than ever before. Now, the most recent game in the series, Ys 10, is not currently marked as Steam Deck verified as of this filming, but I have a feeling it will be soon, and there's never been a better time to get started with the rebirth of one of gaming's most beloved action RPG series. Maybe I should have included this one in the Persona collection, since Persona sprang from the fruitful loins of the SMT series. I don't like that I said that. Sorry about that. But anyway, I think SMT3 Nocturne is different enough that it can comfortably live on its own. SMT stands for Shin Megami Tensei, which means something like the true resurrection of the goddess. And while it's not always immediately or abundantly clear why the series is called that, it has a lot of really creepy religious undertones that make it very cool to experience. SMT3 Nocturne in particular is one of the vibiest games I've ever played. Yes, vibiest is a word, Google. I don't care what you think. But the vibes do so much heavy lifting in conveying the story here, which is dark and oppressive and feels like a metaphorical and sometimes literal descent into madness. The gameplay will be somewhat familiar to Persona players, though different enough to be interesting in its own right. And it's super challenging too. The original game on the PlayStation 2 didn't have selectable difficulty options, but fortunately the remaster gives us an easy mode. That's great if you want to vibe with the game but aren't interested in fighting the freaking Matador boss 55 times until his AI does something stupid and you manage to eke out a joyless victory that ultimately leaves you feeling empty inside. Like, for example. But if you want to play on normal mode, you can cozy up with this game by the fire or in a hot bath and let your surroundings lessen your stress as the game repeatedly kicks your butt. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this video and or finding it helpful, would you mind liking it? And if you're not subscribed, would you mind subscribing as well? It's a small thing, but it helps me and the channel out so much. All right, pitch over, back to the games. Square Enix finds itself on this list a lot, not just because they make great games, but because they seem to be very committed to making sure their games work on the Steam Deck. I already mentioned Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, but they have quite a few other remakes and remasters that fit this list. These three games are more the full-on remake style, and they're all pretty different from each other, not just in presentation, but in gameplay too. First up is Trials of Mana, the remake of the long-lost sequel to Secret of Mana we never got until we did, but like 25 years later. This brings the series into full 3D, but like in a good way. And you've got a bunch of characters to choose from, which alters the story of your playthrough depending on who you go with. There's also Live Alive, another game from the 16-bit era we completely missed out on until suddenly Square Enix decided to remake it in HD 2D and drop it on us out of the blue. This is similar to Trials of Mana in that you get to choose from a variety of different characters, but where this differs is in the fact that each of the characters has their own complete small JRPG for you to play through. How and if all these stories connect to each other is the game's central mystery, and it's worth seeing it through to the end for answers. And finally, Star Ocean: The Second Story R. The second Star Ocean game is pretty widely considered to be the best in the series, so a full-on remake that brings it into a nice evolution of the HD 2D style and updates the gameplay for the modern era is very much appreciated. I've always loved this title, and I'm glad more people are getting an opportunity to play it today. In the olden days, I shied away from strategy RPGs because they seemed A, too tactical, and B, too hard. As the years have gone by, I don't find them so difficult or obtuse anymore. I'd like to think that's because I've gotten better at video games, but that's almost certainly not true. I think there are just way more quality of life features baked in from the get-go. Anyway, I've got 4 games to highlight here. Tactics Ogre Reborn is a beautiful remaster of the classic Tactics Ogre, and it makes it quite a bit more accessible for people like me. It's a classic for a reason, so if you've somehow avoided playing any games in the series before, here's a great place to start. Then you have Triangle Strategy, a game that you'd think the developers gave absolutely no thought to if you were just judging it by its very silly name, but in fact is full of deep gameplay and interesting characters and some choice-based storytelling. If you're less interested in the super serious political plots of those types of strategy RPGs though, then Nipponichi Software should be able to provide some options. Disgaea 7, Vows of the Virtueless, and Phantom Brave are both Steam Deck verified, and these are games with serious gameplay that don't take themselves too seriously, which is a great change of pace. Also, similar to the East section, the newest entry in the Phantom Brave series that just came out isn't currently Deck verified as of this recording, but I imagine it will be soon. And there are other Disgaea games on the verified list as well, so you'll have plenty of options. These are just a couple to get you started. I am a huge supporter of AA games. These are the games that don't get all the budget, but they often more than make up for that by having interesting and unique stories and other aesthetic elements that really work for me. Here are 5 on the deck that I think are worth your time. Fantasian Neo Dimension is the, how do I put it? It's not exactly a remaster, but it's also not a new title. It's like the definitive edition of the former Apple Arcade exclusive from the creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi. The graphical style is one of the most interesting I've ever seen. They sculpted real models in the physical world and used those as the backdrops you'll explore in the game. It's very cool in action. Speaking of action, this one is not. It's turn-based. But it's also one of the most challenging turn-based games I think I've ever played. Especially in the latter portion of the game, it gets hard. So be prepared for that. Next is the Alliance Alive HD Remastered. The Alliance Alive is a really cool story about humans fighting for their freedom against their monster oppressors, and the gameplay takes quite a few tips from the Saga series. This means you'll gain new skills seemingly at random in battles, and your character progression doesn't happen in the traditional leveling up sort of way you might be used to. It's very cool, very different, and the HD Remaster makes it very accessible. Then you have Crystar. This game has gotten flack for not having the most compelling gameplay around, and I'll agree with that. It's pretty stiff, and the levels and enemy designs aren't very good, but it has one of the most interesting stories with some of the most compelling characters I've seen in games, and that alone makes it worth your time. I Am Setsuna is from Square Enix, but it forgoes all the bombast that a lot of their bigger budget games have, and instead it focuses on an intimate story about a woman who needs to sacrifice herself to save the world. It takes place in a series of snowy locales, and the soundtrack is comprised entirely of piano music. It's such an interesting piece of work, and it deserves more attention. And finally for this section, Reinatas. This is another game from Crystar creator Furyu that got a lot of unfair flack when it came out, but I can tell you there's fun gameplay here with a dodge mechanic that works so differently from other action RPGs that it might take you a bit to wrap your head around it. Not only that, but it tells a really poignant and pertinent story about oppression. AA games need more love. Not only are they often great, but they're literally the antidote for so many of the troubles that the video game industry is facing. More games that don't take 10 years and $500 billion to make, please. Finally, it would be silly to leave off some of the best games you can play on the Steam Deck or really anywhere these days. And those are indie games. Small teams and solo developers are going absolutely nuts creating some of the most interesting and out there games we've ever seen, and they're doing it on tiny budgets. It's actually pretty freaking incredible. If you're open to playing some indies, then take a look in these games. No, that wasn't perfect. That wasn't perfect wordplay. That was terrible. That was so forced. What is wrong with me? I'm sorry, everyone. Anyway, Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars is sort of a love letter to Chrono Trigger. They even managed to get Chrono Trigger composer Yasunori Mitsuda to do some of the music. It's a beautiful game with fun characters, the battles use timing-based moves that keep you engaged, and it scratches that nostalgia itch really well. Chained Echoes is another indie game that trades heavily on our nostalgia for 16 and 32-bit JRPGs. It's got fast-paced turn-based combat, and much like one of its inspirations, Xenogears, it even has giant mechs. And last but not least, 8-Bit Adventures 2. Gorgeous pixel art, fun combat, and a compelling story, just pure fun all the way. As a side note, if you're interested in the first 8-Bit Adventures game, The Forgotten Journey, you can technically play it on Steam Deck. I did, at least in part, but you have to do some finagling with some add-ons, otherwise there are some issues. Just something to keep in mind. But anyway, indies are pretty widely available on Steam Deck, and these are just a few that are worth diving into. Okay, that was 30 games, I think. Yeah, pretty sure. But I wanted to throw a bunch more at you here at the end. First of all, most of the Trails games are fully Steam Deck verified, and those that aren't, you can find some pretty easy workarounds to get them running acceptably well. So if you're looking to start your journey with Trails, the PC and by extension the Steam Deck is the only place you can access all of them. Likewise, most of the Final Fantasy games are here as well, primarily in their remastered forms. Taken together, that's a butt-ton more games. Anyway, that's it for now. What did you think? Any big-time JRPGs that are deck verified that I missed? I'm sure there must be. Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And until next time, bye.